In this video, we'll talk about the blood supply to the cerebellum. Cerebellum means the little brain, and it has got tons of neurons that are responsible for maintaining the coordination of our body. If we talk about its blood supply, its blood supply comes through the vertebrals via basilars. Basically, if you look at this diagram, these are two vertebral arteries coming together to form the basilar artery. Now, if you look at this diagram, you can appreciate three arteries coming out of the system. The first one is the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, or PICA. This usually branches from the vertebral artery. Most often, not always, but most often it branches from the vertebral artery, and it goes to the cerebellum to supply the cerebellum. Another artery we have, anterior inferior cerebellar artery. It branches from the basilar artery, and you can appreciate it that it is going underneath the cranial nerve. This is the cranial nerve, and it is going through underneath this nerve. And another artery we have, which is a superior cerebellar artery, which you can appreciate it over here. So basically, these are three arteries that supply your cerebellum. Right, now let's move on. Now in this slide, I want to talk about the blood-brain barrier. As you know that our brain is a very delicate organ, and it is busy all the time, and neurons are always firing, or they are not firing. Neurons only do one thing, whether they fire or they do not fire. So they are not very good at defending themselves against the external forces, or against the pathogens. So they cannot defend themselves against the stresses of the environment. So we have a barrier called as a blood-brain barrier. Basically, blood-brain barrier is to protect your brain from all kind of foreign chemicals and substances. It is created by the capillaries and astrocytic junctions. Now if you look at this normal capillary network, this is a normal peripheral capillary. In this capillary, you can appreciate the pores are there, slits are there. Things can easily go inside, and they can come outside of this capillary network, of this peripheral capillary. But if you look at the brain, in the brain, capillaries are a bit different. They have got tight junctions. These are actually the tight junctions, you can appreciate them. And furthermore, they are surrounded by astrocytic processes. So these both structures form a junction called as a tight junction. So it does not allow many things to go into the brain. So basically, there are few things that can cross this junction. For example, glucose, because the brain is the only obligatory organ that you use, obligatory user of glucose. It cannot use anything other than glucose for its energy needs. So of course, glucose can cross this barrier. Furthermore, alcohol can also cross this barrier. So these are two things that can cross this barrier, and many drugs cannot cross this barrier. So if I give you a very famous example, that when bacterial infections happen in the brain, most of the antibiotics cannot cross this barrier. So we have to design some sort of drugs that can cross this barrier. So it's very difficult to treat those infections that are in brain because of this blood-brain barrier. Right, so this is the story of the blood-brain barrier. Now that's all about the blood-brain barrier. I can give you another example also. If you know about the disease called as a Parkinson disease, I guess you must have been familiar with this disease. Parkinson disease is the lack of dopamine made by certain areas of brain called the substantia nigra. Now substantia nigra projects from the brainstem up to the cortex. Now dopamine is a neurotransmitter. When you don't have that dopamine, you get the symptoms of Parkinson disease, which is kind of a frozen kind of effect, and other kind of mobility issues are there. So dopamine is a very large molecule. It cannot cross this blood-brain barrier easily. So to treat that disease, we cannot directly give dopamine. We have to design a molecule called as levodopa. Levodopa is a kind of one of those amino acids that have facilitated transporters inside these junctions, inside the blood-brain barrier, or the capillaries of brains have the junctions for the levodopa. So levodopa can get into this rectified specific environment of brain. Right, so it can go into brain and can be converted into dopamine, and we can treat that disease with the help of that specific medicine which has got facilitated transport channels over there. So that was a very little example. Thank you very much.